So good afternoon. I would like to welcome everybody to our third in a series of Wallace webinars based on the 5 key practices of leadership. So the Wallace Foundation has been involved with school leadership for some time. And so since 2000, the Wallace Foundation has published more than 70 reports on school leadership. So Wallace and NAESP have formed a partnership over the years, and these are some of the commitments that we have to the profession of school leadership. As many of you are aware, NAESP is very committed to leading in the advocacy and support for elementary and middle school principals. And also, Wallace is also committed to a very similar charge in making sure that they are fostering improvements for learning and enrichment for all students, and really looking at the vitality of the arts as a part of this. So since 2000, Wallace has supported states and school districts in developing and improving school leadership models. Their efforts have touched 24 states and numerous urban school districts. Currently, the Wallace Foundation is involved with what is called the Principal Pipeline. This is a 5-year initiative undertaking helping districts develop a larger corps of effective school principals and aspiring leaders. In 2011, 6 districts became participants in this initiative. And as you see here, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, Denver, Gwinnett County, Hillsborough, New York City, and today we'll be talking to a leader from Prince George's County, Maryland. So through Wallace's extensive work with school districts and through research, they established 5 key practices for school leadership. One is shaping a vision of academic success for all students, creating a climate hospitable to education, cultivating leadership in others, improving instruction, and managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement. Today we'll be focusing on the key practice of cultivating leadership in others. So I am Deborah Tyler, and I will be your moderator today. I am the Director of Principal Leadership Development for NAESP, and we'll be joined by Dr. William Blake, who's Principal at Stephen Decatur Middle School in Clinton, Maryland. So Dr. Blake is our panelist today, and I think his quote on this slide really personifies his leadership. And so to give you a little background on his leadership journey, Dr. Blake is considered among his colleagues as the digital educator. His work with social media and student engagement has propelled him to a career of creating learning environments that result in academic excellence. As an administrator with Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland, Dr. Blake has yielded double-digit gains, increasing 9th grade promotion and 12th grade graduation rates by creating personalized learning structures with a focus on digital and blended learning. Dr. Blake began his career in the classroom as a family and consumer sciences teacher at the high school level. Further, he has served as senior class sponsor, peer mediation teacher, National Honor Society advisor, assistant principal, and currently serves as the principal at Stephen Decatur Middle School in Clinton, Maryland. Dr. Blake co-founded Cool Ways to Teach, an educational consulting firm focused on building teacher capacity through professional development. He believes educators must become lifelong learners in order to provide students with the skills needed to compete in a global society. Recently, Dr. Blake, along with Mr. Victor Craig and Mr. Joseph Spike, co-founded the National Association of Black Male Educators. The purpose of this group is to develop the capacity of black male educators to achieve results that will yield outstanding student achievement. Dr. Blake earned his bachelor's degree from Morgan State University in Family and Consumer Sciences and his master's degree from Trinity University in Curriculum and Instruction. Lastly, he earned his doctorate degree in Educational Leadership from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. Dr. Blake is also a proud and devoted member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. So welcome, Dr. Blake, this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure on having me for this webinar. I greatly appreciate it.
So we are greatly anticipating your description of your journey in cultivating leadership in others. So I'll let you begin.
All right. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. As Deborah mentioned in my biography, I'm currently a first-year principal in Prince George's County at Stephen Decatur Middle School. And just to elaborate further on my leadership journey, I definitely want to share my success in the OUTS program that was sponsored by Prince George's County in conjunction with the Wallace Foundation. The Wallace Foundation provided Prince George's County Public Schools with a grant to create a school leadership program to prepare leaders to become assistant principals and principals. And through the OUTS program, which stands for Aspiring Leadership Program for Student Success, it was there where I was able to learn the characteristics and the traits on how to cultivate leaders within my building now. Because during that program, they made it clear and they stressed the fact for us as candidates to take the initiative and to lead certain instructional initiatives in our building. And by doing so, we are able to take that same tenacity and desire into our schools to cultivate the leaders within our building. So as we discuss cultivating leadership, there are three major rocks that I would like to stress throughout this webinar. And those three rocks are, first, identify personality traits of your team and team members. Second, you must focus and be intentional on building a positive school culture. And that positive school culture begins with your stakeholders, such as your scholars or your students, your parents, your teachers, and as well as your community stakeholders. And lastly, I would like to talk extensively around how to create opportunities for others to lead. So when I'm discussing identifying your personality traits, as a first-year principal coming into Stephen Decatur Middle School, it was very important for me to identify the personality of my administrative team, to identify the personalities of our school leadership team, and also to identify the personality of our faculty at large. And by doing that, I used an exercise called the Compass Points exercise. And with the Compass Points exercise, it breaks the personalities up into 4 characteristics. And those 4 characteristics are in symbolization of the compass, north, south, east, and west. And as you see here on the screen, each compass point have a specific set of skills and a specific characteristic. Coming into Stephen Decatur, I share with my staff up front that I am a north person. I'm all about acting and let's getting the job done, and also let's try new things. And also by being a north person, it allows me to stay on task, to become a task master, and also to become task oriented. And additionally, I shared with my admin team when I first met them that I need someone to be an East person, I need someone to be a South person, and I also need someone to be a West person, because collectively, all of our personalities will balance us out throughout the course of the school year and throughout the course of our tenure being together. So during our first meeting together, as you can see during the next slide, you will see evidence of our compass points. And I am grateful to have 2 outstanding administrators, and so our administrative team consists of 3 dynamic change agents. And as you can see, with mine being in the middle, everything that a north person symbolized, I notified that on the chart paper. And as you can see, one of my APs is a South person, and another one of my APs is a West person. When it comes to that whole caring piece and getting the staff on board and getting the staff to follow suit with the initiatives within the school, my South 8 assistant principal does a great job in understanding and communicating and also understanding everyone's mindset behind the initiatives. When it comes to my other AP, who is a West person, he does a great job as far as paying attention to the detail and also putting a strategic plan of action in place to ensuring that we are getting the job done. So together, we are able to balance each other out to chart the ship here in our building. Now, the great piece about cultivating leadership, after I facilitated this model with my admin team, I left it up to them to turnkey the information to our school leadership team, and then our school leadership team had to turnkey the information to our faculty and staff at large. So prior to the first week of school, when our faculty and staff had to come back for that professional development week, I did not facilitate this compass point exercise at all. I left it up to the administrative team, and I also left it up to the school leadership team to turnkey this information so that they could become comfortable in delivering this type of professional development to our staff and identifying the personality traits amongst our building. And by doing so, when we go to our next slide, we were able to align the compass points. And once we identified the compass points of the admin team and the school leadership team and also the faculty as well, we were able to build teams based on their personalities. So what does that mean and what does that look like? In Prince George's County, we are currently implementing our literacy plan. And with the literacy plan, the whole purpose of the literacy plan is to encourage and implement reading and writing across content levels. And with that, by us already having a school leadership team intact, this was the first opportunity for me to create a new team, which is our literacy team, to allow us to implement our plan with fidelity. So based off of the data results from our data points, I was able to strategically develop a team consisting of a north person, a south, an east, and a west, so they could assist and be the forebearers of implementing our literacy plan with fidelity. And as you look at the slide with the artifacts of our literacy plan, you will see members of our team doing a focus walk. You will see members of our team participating in professional development, and you will also see members of our team being observed implementing literacy in our classroom. And I'm so excited to show you all evidence of student work, because at the end of the day, to ensure that the team is being successful, the student work is the key evidence with that. So when I was able to develop this team, I used the compass points exercise to identify who are the team members with the best personalities in reference to the different quadrants of the compass point to lead this work.
Great. I mean, Dr. Blake, you really brought up some really great points that I want to pivot back to. And you set the stage in saying that you are a new principal to this school, and it was very important for you to be very transparent about your own leadership capabilities, and especially sharing those with your administrative team. So do you find yourself pushing each other into different quadrants depending on what the task is at hand?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as early as last week, I put forth the charge to the administrative team. I said, let's walk a mile in someone else's compass point. And what that means, by me being a north person, I traded a compass point with my AP who was a south person. And my AP who was a south person traded her compass point with my AP who is a west person. And by doing so, we were able to develop the mindset of the process of how each other think during situations. So with this particular situation, we had to make a decision that was going to affect the school at large. And by me being the north person as to always getting the job done, I had to take a step back to think about, okay, how would this affect the staff at large? How would this affect our math department? How would this affect our social studies department? So I had to step back and step in the seat of our south person and being that caring administrator and making a decision from a south point of view as opposed to a north point of view. So within our administrative team, yes, we do go back and forth, and we trade off each other's points so that we could take a step back and just think and reflect on, okay, how is the South person thinking right now as we deliver and deliberate on initiative or task at hand?
And so do you see the same stream of consciousness going into your content teams? Are they very aware of each other's compass points and mindful of these as they're planning and strategizing around student achievement?
I definitely say that the awareness of the compass points is evident in our department meetings. So each week, our school meets as departments. For example, our ELA team meets each week, our math team, and so forth. And within those departments, since for the most part, most of our teachers have been working together for a minimum at least two or 3 years together, so they have a pretty good idea of the compass points that are inside of the room, and they do a very good job of balancing the compass points of each other and accepting each other's compass points mindset when collaborating on a task, and also when making a decision as a whole that affects the department as well.
Right, and I think it's very commendable that you all have anchored yourselves around the critical area of literacy that can go across content areas. So I'm sure that with this alignment, you're going to see great results for your students. So let's go on and talk about some other ways that you've incorporated some thinking around cultivating leaders.
Sure. So this slide right here comes from my participation in the OUTS program that is funded by the Wallace Foundation in Prince George's County. We spent a lot of time analyzing and focusing the work around Bowman and Dill's reframing organization. And within this text and within this work, Bowman and Dill breaks up in the organization within 4 different quadrants. And that quadrant is structural, human resources, political, and symbolic. And according to Bowman and Dill, whenever a leader, no matter whether they are in an educational setting, a business setting, an industrial setting, each one of these quadrants are being affected when you are cultivating and picking and selecting a leader. For example, when it comes to the structural piece, Bowman and Dill discusses that what structures do you have in place to identify your leaders? For example, do you have an interview process? Do you have an application round? Do you have a practicum process where you are able to observe people in action prior to selecting them to be in your leaders? When it comes to the human resources piece, what systems do you have in place in developing and investing in your leaders and equipping them with all of the resources that they need to be successful and to sustain sustainability within their role? The political piece, Bowman and Dill discusses that's the piece that people do not tell you about before you get in the seat, that every decision that you make is a political decision. So if you are picking a leader, you better have a great reason and be able to justify the actions behind selecting that leader to the staff at large. And also, that symbolic piece. Every leader that you choose, according to Bowman and Dill, they are symbolic of your leadership style as a leader, and they are also symbolic of your mindset as well. So these are the 4 quadrants that I definitely would like to share with the audience when you are selecting your leaders. Make sure you keep these in mind so that you are selecting and cultivating your leaders with fidelity throughout the process.
Right, and you know, these are great frames, and I think for a lot of new leaders out there, what I find is the political and the symbolic are so important, and having an ultra awareness of those. I compare the principalship to being under a microscope with many eyes on you. You know, you're gauged on your personality. You're gauged on your temperament, and so with all these different eyes looking at you, the things that can sometimes derail leaders is not having that awareness of the political and the symbolic of what you are trying to do each day. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the political and symbolic piece, especially in the context of you coming in as a new principal?
Sure. So as a first-year principal, it's very important. It's not only important, I have been advised very heavily to come in and to observe processes. So to observe the structures that are currently in place, observe the systems that are currently in place, and do not make too many do not make too many decisions that will affect the school at large. Because as a first-year principal, you want to be able to come in and to get a holistic picture of what's currently taking place. And through your observational process, you are making mental notes throughout the course of the year. So as you continue your tenure throughout the principalship, you are able to build quality relationships and to make decisions with fidelity that will affect the staff at large. So and I give you a great example. I came in and I have made one, let's say, quote unquote, drastic decision, and that drastic decision was to implement a second staff meeting of the month. Traditionally, the staff here, they have been meeting once a month as a staff, but due to our literacy plan, due to the initiatives that are taking place, I met with the instructional leadership team, and I also met with our admin team to gauge their understanding. How do you all feel if we were to add an extra staff meeting of the month? And they gave me the pushback, and they gave me the resistance, and they also gave me some of the thought processes that the staff will think and all. But prior to making the decision, I posed the question as an idea, as a proposal to the staff at large, and I also did a survey. And the survey, believe it or not, they were more willing and they wanted to meet twice a month. So instead of coming into the building and saying that we're going to meet twice a month and this is my way, I executed the collaborative process and going forth with the admin team and going forth with the school leadership team, and also gauging the staff and giving them a survey to ask them about this, and we were able to come up with the decision to meet twice a month.
I think that's great, a great way to garner their input. And when we talk about these structures not only affect what goes on inside the school with your internal stakeholders, but these structures are also touched by what I call your outside stakeholders who are looking in at what's going on with you and your staff and students at the school. So do you want to talk a little bit more about the human resources piece of this?
Yes. So with the human resources piece, during the OUTS program and during my leadership development here in Prince George's County, we focused on this frame intentionally because it is important as a school leader and as a principal, number one, to hire the right people, to keep the right people, invest in them, and empower them. So, and by doing so, Bowman and Deal gives you practices on how to do it. So when it comes to hiring the right people, yes, you must be selective and know what you want, but by doing that, you must have a process or a structure in place. So rather it's going to be an interview process, rather it's going to be an application process, or rather it's going to be a practicum process. You must have some kind of processes in place that will allow you to be selective, but to select your leaders with fidelity. Once your leaders are selected, what are you going to do to keep them? It's very well known, according to research, adults as well as children, they love praise. So we must continue to build up the self-esteem, build up the self-efficacy, and to reward your leaders when they're doing well, and also be able to have those courageous conversations when you notice their growth areas. And when it's time for you to have those courageous conversations, provide opportunities for support and best practices for them to enhance on their growth areas as well. The key that is very important to me is how are you investing in your leaders. And by doing that, I am an advocate on professional development and building your leaders and providing them with the resources they need to build their capacity. So for an example, when we have our school leadership meetings, it is important that I model those meetings in the form of a professional development. So it's less of me on the stage presenting and delivering information, and it's more of me providing professional development and allowing them to collaborate to complete a task, allowing them to collaborate to build and facilitate and to build a model for a future faculty meeting for our staff. So professional development is very big and very key when you are cultivating and when you want to retain your leaders. And lastly, you must empower them. And by empowering them as a leader, And by being a first-year principal, I must admit it is kind of hard and difficult to step away and to give all of your trust to let your leaders lead. But in order for them to lead with fidelity, you must step away and trust that they could get the job done according to the expectations that you have set in your building. So once you have set this particular frame structurally in your building, according to Bowman and Dale, I also believe that you will have tremendous success in cultivating your leaders within your school.
Great. And so we have a great question from our audience, and I'm going to ask you this question, and I think it's something that we'll elaborate even more on as we go through the presentation. But the question that has been given to us is, what advice would you give to a first-year assistant principal, and how can the assistant principal support the vision of the principal?
Okay. I believe that's a phenomenal question. When it comes to the assistant principals are I refer to them as the workers in the trenches, because it's up to the principal to deliver the overall mission and vision of the school, but the assistant principal can take that work within their departments. So for an example, if you are an assistant principal in a school that is departmentalized and you are over various departments within your building, take the same mission and vision from the school principal and conceptualize that mission and vision within your department. So for an example, if we have a vision centered on literacy, what does literacy look like in your department that you're monitoring as an assistant principal? What type of instructional strategies is your department delivering to attack the literacy need within your building? So in order to support the vision of the principal, take that work and and really dig in and hone into it within your departments, so that collectively throughout the school, everyone is speaking with one voice. The principal is speaking with one voice to the staff, and the assistant principal is speaking with one voice to the department leaders and the department chairs, and the department chairs is speaking with one voice to the teachers. So everyone has that one voice of executing the mission and vision of that school.
Great. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree, and and to further elaborate on, the advice that I would give to a first-year assistant principal, it's very similar to the advice that I would give to a first-year principal. It's really learning who the main movers and shakers are in your building, really building that team around you that can help you execute what you believe in with students. As far as supporting the vision of a principal, I think, Dr. Blake, you're in a very advantageous position, because you can reframe that vision based on what you're learning and what you're getting to know about that school. And I think that assistant principals need to understand that their voices need to be equally heard in these decisions. And so it's my hope that assistant principals are part of a leadership team in the building where their expertise and their knowledge is valued as well.
Exactly, and I definitely concur with that as well, Ms. Tyler, because the assistant principals, they are there to assist the principal in delivering that mission and vision and to executing that work. Because without them, we can't do it alone. So
right.
I count on my assistant principals heavily to monitor what's going on in the collaborative planning meetings to ensure that everyone is speaking with that one voice of fidelity to ensure the mission is being executed in the building.
Right, and I think that assistant principals are depended on to be what I call that ear to the ground, because many times staff members will be more comfortable in bringing a concern to the assistant principal rather than the principal. And so having that open, honest communication and giving each other feedback on what they're seeing, what they're hearing, and again, honoring those ideas that assistant principals can bring to the table when you're strategizing and when you're problem solving is very, very important. So let's talk a little bit more about the opportunities that you've created in your building.
So in order to cultivate outstanding leaders, it is very important to create opportunities for your teachers to lead. And by doing so as the principal, I believe that principals have the autonomy of creating multiple opportunities for teachers to become leaders. One of the opportunities that is near and dear to my heart, and because it has assisted me to become an exceptional instructional leader, is the fact of developing and cultivating administrative interns. I am lucky to have numerous teachers in my building right now who are working on their Admin 1 certificate, and within the requirements from their school and their program, they have to complete certain tasks and to lead certain programs and certain initiatives in our building. And it's through the administrative interns that I lead on tremendously to assist in facilitating the work that is being done, because not only are they meeting the needs of their program, they are also that extra leg of gathering the support amongst their fellow colleagues to buy in into certain initiatives and missions and visions within our building. The next piece is definitely creating opportunities for teachers to lead committees. When it comes to many schools might have a school leadership team or a school-based management team, instead of having the assistant principal and or the principal to lead those meetings, it is very important to build the capacity of your teachers to allow them to co-facilitate that meeting. So for an example, when it comes to our literacy plan and we identify a teacher who can teach close reading very well. So during that next staff meeting where we have a PD on close reading, instead of it being facilitated by myself or my admin team, allow that teacher to facilitate that meeting to build their capacity for delivering professional development and also for building the capacity of the other teachers and their other fellow colleagues. And also creating opportunities for teachers to chair after school programs, to chair intervention programs, and also to chair certain committees and subcommittees within your building. And by doing this, I believe that principals are maximizing the talent that is in their building, because when it comes to administrative interns, of course, their goal is to become an administrator. So when it's time for them to grow and when they leave your building, we are also cultivating by having other teachers lead meetings and subcommittees. They could feel right into their spot to continue the success of the school.
Right, and so I don't know if you touched on, did you share how many administrative interns you have in your building?
I am grateful to have 7 administrative interns in our building, and I know that is most for than most, but I consider it to be a blessing because they are able to lead the work and to collaborate on the work with my admin team, school leadership team, and within the staff of our building.
I think that many principals would consider it a blessing to have 7 administrative interns in one building. And so talk a little bit more about the process, and we're going to talk about the interview process that you put in place, but talk a little bit more about your chairperson positions, because I know that different schools have different approaches to determining who their chairpersons are for the various departments, and I know coming in new to the school, you basically had to keep the status quo, but you presented some very interesting ideas around this chairperson position when we talked earlier. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. As the first year principal coming here to Stephen Decatur, actually all of our chairs were put in place. So when it comes to our department chairpersons, they were already in place prior to me arriving. But in my previous building, in my previous school culture, I have came from a place where the chairpersons, they went through an interview process, and the chairperson position was rotated every 2 years. So as being a first year principal, I did not want to come in and to implement that process during my first year. I definitely wanted to sit back and observe to see what's currently going on and how our chairpersons are currently facilitating their departments. But my goal within a 2-year period, after I analyzed and gathered my data through informal observations and observations on how our chairpersons lead, is to implement an interview process for my chairpersons. And the whole process behind that is to ensure that you are giving and you are using and finding the talent in your building, and you're not just holding one person to lead a department for 5 to 7 years. You are given the opportunity to have that turnover in the leadership position so you can build the capacity of other teachers to become school leaders. Because when it comes time for them to wanting to grow in another position, they could say that, you know what, I led an entire department at the middle school I was currently at, and I was able to learn these different leadership practices and these different leadership standards during my tenure as a department chair. So my purpose behind that is to build the capacity and to identify talent within your building, and not to make that position stagnant, and to always have new and fresh ideas every 2 years within that position.
Great. So it sounds like you are really grooming your staff to take on other responsibilities, because as your administrative interns finish their internships, there's that possibility that they'll move into assistant principal position. So I think it's very good that you have a plan in place as to how you will not create a leadership void in your building.
Thank you, and that's the whole purpose behind that, is to make sure that if once a position becomes vacant, someone else is able to step in to continue the work is going on. Because at the end of the day, the way that you reach success is about sustainability. So you must have quality leaders and that are able to sustain the work of the mission and vision of the school, to continue to make sure that you maximize that optimal student success within your building.
Right, I agree. And when you talk about the sustainability within your staff, but that sustainability has to be a piece of the leadership team as well. So I think that's great. So other opportunities that you've created for leadership in your building?
Sure. So, and I touched on this briefly, after-school programs, leading collaborative planning meetings. A piece that I also believe is important is identifying liaisons to partner with our PTA. So being that our PTA meets once a month and our exec board meets twice a month, there are times that the principal and or the admin team cannot make all of those meetings. So to create a teacher liaison position where that teacher could be the liaison to the PTA and bring that information back to the principal and to the admin team so that we can continue that working partnership together. In addition, create opportunities for teachers to lead data analysis meetings. So these are all opportunities where the principal does not have to be the sage on the stage. Just like in the classroom and other principals who are watching, in the classroom, we want our teachers to step back and to not be the sage on the stage, and to step back from being that lecturer while delivering instruction. So in order to model that, the way that I model that during my my faculty meetings and my leadership team meetings is to not to be that person who was always facilitating, but to bring my APs, to bring my other teacher leaders in to build the agenda with me, and to also co-facilitate the meetings as well. And by doing this, you are building the capacity of other leaders in your building so that they can continue to carry the torch of student achievement here within your school.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about your teacher leadership initiative in your school and your approach to this.
Sure. So in order to sustain your teacher leaders, I believe these are the 3 primary areas that will allow principals to sustain their work. I touched briefly on professional development. In order for us to enhance our capacity and to enhance our practice, we must have multiple avenues and multiple outlets towards professional development. And by doing so, we are building the capacity of our teachers to not only to build their leadership capacity, but also to take their leadership style and to execute the leadership standards within certain departments in our buildings. So when it comes to my faculty meetings and my school leadership meetings, I do my best to model the leadership expectations. So, for example, in a perfect world, and it is actually taking place right here in my school, whatever takes place in our school leadership meetings, the goal is for our department chairpersons to model and turnkey that information from our school leadership meetings into our department meetings. And I specifically execute and display certain leadership qualities and leadership characteristics for our department chairpersons to take back to the department. And the way that I know this is taking place is because our admin team, we have developed a monitoring tool for our collaborative planning, and the monitoring tool is to ensure that we are providing feedback to our department chairpersons that, number one, are they creating our meetings with an agenda? Are they providing opportunities for our staff members to collaborate on a task? Are they allowing opportunities for our staff members to be co-facilitators as well? So it is very important to model the leadership expectations from the principal seat so that they can turnkey that in their department meetings, in their team meetings. And lastly but not least, it's very important to not be a micromanager and to trust that your team has the ability to lead. And by doing that, as a first-year principal, I must admit that is very difficult at times, just to step back and let go. But in order to build a relationship and in order to build the self-efficacy of your staff, it is very important that they know that you trust them, that they could lead with fidelity and they could lead according to the expectations and standards that have been set in school.
Right. I mean, that trust piece is so important. And just like we try to instill in students, you know, sometimes certain initiatives are going to fail. And it's, you know, having that trust with you and other individuals in that building that it's okay to take risks. And so thinking about, you know, not everybody is a leader. I tend to think that we all have some innate leadership traits that have not always been tapped. But what about those teachers who are just fine in your building, not being in the forefront? How do you include them and make them see that they are just as important to the work as those leaders who are out in front of it?
So the most amazing thing as being the principal, you had the opportunity to use I would say a characteristic voluntold, and by using the voluntold characteristic, you are kind of building relationships. So just like for that teacher or just like that student who was kind of shy in the classroom, you strategically called their name out in order for them to report out on a topic and things of that nature. That same practice could take place within the school amongst the adults. So for those teachers that are shy and are timid to lead, if you notice their ability to lead, that's where you just go and have those informal conversations and say, you know what, hey, Ms. Tyler, I noticed that you use instructional technology very well. Is it possible, if you don't mind, sharing your talent with a staff pretty much in a department meeting or in a whole staff meeting? And by that way, you are building a relationship, and you are actually building their self-efficacy by having that one-on-one conversation, by saying, you know what, I notice your talent and I notice your strength, but I also want you to share your talent and your strength with the staff at large. Can you assist our school culture and can you assist our school body in building the capacity around instructional leadership? And I have been able to have those conversations already during my first year as a principal, and those teachers that I've had those conversations with, they are grateful that, number one, I noticed that talent and that I didn't call them out in front of the staff at large. I had those one-on-one conversations with them by saying, you know what, I noticed your talent, I noticed that you are great at doing this. Help build the capacity of the staff by doing that. And they were more likely to do it that way as opposed to calling them out in front of the staff as a whole.
Right, I'm sure. So let's talk a little bit more about the strategic processes that you put in place around cultivating leadership in your building.
And this goes back to the work of Bowman and Deal. And when they talk about that structural piece, what are the structural, what's the structural structures and systems that you have in your school to make sure that you are cultivating leaders with fidelity on your building? So at the end of this year, when it's time, if a department chairperson wants to resign from their position or resign from their post, I will implement an interview process to select the next department chairperson. And with that interview process, I will select a panel. It will consist of definitely the admin team and also other teacher leaders in the building. And within that, I will model that process after, let's say, the assistant principal process, because it is very important for our leaders to be engaged with certain structures and certain processes that take place within our school system. So, for an example, if I know that you are leveraging yourself to become an assistant principal, I want to make sure that I'm starting to model those certain assistant principal practices and assistant principal exercises for you to be successful in the future. So during that interview process is going to be structured after our AP interview process that is currently here in our district. It is very important that our staff members know how to perfect the resume, and they are able to symbolize their work experience on that one page or on that 2 to 3 page resume. Because when it comes to our HR, as when they are combing through the list of assistant principals and combing through the list of principals, they get 1,000 resumes every interview round and interview session. What is your resume going to do to stand out? And what are you going to put on your resume that is going to set yourself apart from the other leaders in the building? So I believe it's very important to provide professional development and to build the capacity around perfecting the resume throughout this process. And lastly, by doing so, principals and school leaders, they are able to create a structure to select leaders with fidelity. And you have heard me use that word a lot throughout this webinar, because that word we use a lot in our district, and we also use a lot through our OUTS program that's funded through the Wallace Foundation. As a leader, you must do everything with fidelity. So when it comes to selecting a leader, when it comes to cultivating your leaders, and when it comes to sharing with the staff the reasoning and the justification behind certain decisions, you must do that with fidelity and by involving and making it a collaborative process across the board. So when you are doing this, when you are cultivating leaders in your building, leaders must have a strategic process aligned to make sure that they are doing it with fidelity across the board.
Great. So I particularly like how you have aligned with your district policies and procedures for pursuing the assistant principalship and principalship. This has been a great discussion, and we are getting some great questions. So a question that has just come into us is, what experiences, education, training, or professional development has best prepared you for the principalship?
You all have heard me talk about the OUTS program in Prince George's County a lot. And there's a component in the OUTS program that they developed this past year where they created a leadership development panel. And that leadership development panel consisted of instructional directors, which are principal supervisors. They consisted of associate superintendents, and they consisted of other district leaders in our district. And throughout the course of the year, we had to present our leadership experience and our leadership work to this panel. Now, mind you, the best thing about this panel, there was a possibility that the people that you presented to throughout the school year, they potentially will sit on your principal panel for your principal interview. So I was able to sell myself on the work that I currently done as an assistant principal and how I would translate that work to being a principal to this leadership development panel. And throughout the course of the year, they were able to provide support, provide feedback, and be intentional in developing my capacity as a principal. So I definitely owe a lot of my work to the OUTS program in Prince George's County, but most importantly to the leadership development panel that they created within that OUTS program, which allowed me to share my experiences with other school leaders. So when it was time for me to execute that interview, I was able to just really translate everything from that panel towards the interview process, which helped me get to this role today.
Great. So another question we have is, how do you support teacher leaders to move past their personal biases?
At the end of the day, the best way to support teacher leaders to move past their personal biases is to show research and to show best practices that have been executed, number one, in other school districts, best practices that have been executed in other schools, to show them that, you know what, in order for us to move past this bias, this practice works. And there is research behind this practice, and to also engage them in book talk and to engage them in focus and focus groups and focus learning around certain practices, so that they can put the theory and the practice together that will allow them to move past their bias behind certain initiatives or behind certain processes. Because through my experiences, I have experienced when I show research and when I also show the practice behind it, that they are able to shift their mindset into buying into certain initiatives and to certain best practices as well.
Right. This has been such a great conversation. We have another question too, and I know that we are short on time, so I want to make sure that we're addressing the questions that are being submitted to us. So another question is, I coach our instructional lead teachers in our building, and I'm having a difficult time getting them to understand how important it is to point out what is working in a teacher's classroom and not just focus on the things that are not working.
So a great practice behind that, and I wish I was able to show this into the PowerPoint, is the learning walk and the focus walk process. And by doing that, you are, so for this particular person, to determine and for teachers to point out what's working well is to be very specific and descriptive when gathering evidence with during your learning walks and focus walks. So in Prince George's County, we use the data-wise process. And the data-wise process is a way for us to enhance our school improvement model. And when we are collecting data, they have 4 quadrants that that data falls in, but we are only supposed to focus on one of the quadrants. And one of the quadrants that we put the focus on is being specific and descriptive. The other quadrants are being specific and judgmental, general and judgmental, and specific and descriptive and judgmental. But in order to focus on what we are doing well, we want to focus on being specific and descriptive. So when we focus on that data specifically, we are taking our judgments and we are taking assumptions out of the process and saying what is not going well inside the classroom. And when you are analyzing data during that lens, you are able to shift the conversation on the pluses in the class, what's going on in the classroom, and able to have a more intense conversation on how to impact the growth areas in the classroom when you are being specific and descriptive around the work that was taking place inside the classroom.
Great. So another question is, has Wallace published any journal articles about the ALPS program? And so as we go through the end of the presentation, I will share a link with you to the Wallace Foundation, and you will find a treasure trove of research and documents that can help you answer this question. So moving through, and now I'm not moving through again.
Click down, there you go.
Okay, so moving through, we've talked about how, feedback is your friend, and how it's really helped you build capacity and monitor growth and really enhance that self-efficacy in your school. And one of the other things that you pointed out in the presentation is this feeding the need.
Yes. And with feeding the need, this came from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For all of our educators who are who majored in rather elementary or secondary education, we did work around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And with that, with being great leaders, I believe it's very important to focus on the psychological needs of our staff. So making them feel like that they are wanted and that they are able to do this work. And once you give them that, once you feed that need, then you are able to feed the need of their safety needs, knowing that if they make a mistake, that they're not going to lose their position. If they make a mistake, they're not going to lose their leadership role. That they should be able to feel safe that they can make mistakes, and that as a leader, you're going to provide the support needed for them to excel. And then the social, the esteem needs, and the self-actualization needs, they all interrelate with one another, because By the social piece, you are working in a collaborative environment and you are able to lean on other staff members to assist you in your leadership role, which will encourage your self-efficacy and your self-esteem. And when it comes to that self-actualization level, you are able to go above and beyond and to take initiatives in leading with fidelity with your department and leading with a passion within the school at large. So as a leader, if you feed the need according to Maslow hierarchy of needs, you are able to empower your staff to be amazing in their work.
Great. And so another resource that you've used with your staff is How Full is Your Bucket? That's based on strength, the Gallup Strength Finders.
Yeah, and by doing this, this builds a culture. And by filling your bucket, you are giving positive bucket drops with words of encouragement, with words of self-motivation to encourage your staff to go on throughout the course of the year and to lead with vigor, to lead with passion, and let them know when they're doing things well. You know what? I noticed that. Let me add this drop to your bucket. And by doing so, you are building the self-efficacy of your staff and knowing that they are being appreciated, and you are empowering them to be successful in your building.
Great. And so, I mean, this picture personifies the eagle pride that you have built in the school, and you know, it all comes down to culture. And, you know, when I talked to you earlier, I mean, when you look at the great practitioners out there who are sharing, I think about Paul Bambrick-Santoyo's work in Leverage Leadership, where he talks about culture is so important, and he calls it a process of rinse, lather, and repeat. When you look at Bill Daggett's work around model schools, he talks about culture trumps strategy. If you don't have the right culture in place, no matter what strategy you try to put in place, it's not going to stick. So I want to sort of pivot and end with another question that came from our audience. And I think this is a very important one. So the participant asks, can you sum up the top 3 pointers that you would share with any aspiring administrator?
Sure. The top 3 pointers that I would share with any aspiring administrator is the number 1 is to be collaborative. We can't do this work alone. We can't work in isolation. So it's very important for you to come out of your office and to collaborate with all stakeholders, whether they're teachers, students, parents, your secretary, your paraprofessionals. You must be a collaborative leader in executing this work. The second piece is being transparent. And by being transparent, that in a case, for some, you might call it as being vulnerable, but being transparent, your staff is able to see that you are human and that, number 1, if you don't have the answers, you are able to go research the answers to come back to them. You are able to make mistakes, but you are also able to be transparent in your leadership work and your leadership role. And the last piece is to give quality feedback. As a leader, it's very important to give feedback to all of your stakeholders, rather it's having those courageous conversations, or rather you just empowering them to continue the great work that they're doing. So I would definitely say collaboration, transparency, and immediate feedback.
Great. And Dr. Blake, I would really like to thank you. You are a very inspiring leader. And I see you continuing to do great things at your school and in your career as well. So I think our conversation today has been very, very rich, and it's because of the great information that you've shared with all of us today. So I'm going to, this presentation will be on our website. So these are some further discussion and dialogue questions that you can delve into around creating, cultivating leadership. And we have some upcoming future webinars in the new year. In January, we'll be talking about improving instruction to enable teachers to teach at their best and students to learn at their utmost. And then our last 5 key practice is managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement in February. So as I mentioned, here are some websites where you can go to get further information around NAESP's work and the Wallace Foundation work around this. And also to let everyone know that we'll be continuing this dialogue during our national conference that will be held at National Harbor this year. There is a strong strand in our conference around the Wallace work. And so this is July 6th through 8th at National Harbor. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here with us today, and most of all, thank you, Dr. Blake.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to continuing the collaboration, and not only with NAESP, but to continue providing support to our fellow colleagues.
I'm planning a visit to Decatur Middle School.
All right, anytime. We greatly appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everyone.